Okay, so I've got a really good camera here.
Yeah.
They told me it was awesome. It's got 3 lenses, takes good pictures. These are different though, so we're going to talk about different types of cameras because we have a lot of options, a lot of choices, and there are reasons to choose different cameras for different things.
I bet that one costs about the same as this one.
It might be.
That's the most used camera in the world, by the way, that you have in your pocket. Yeah, so what we have here, these are 3, different but similar types of cameras. What we've got is a traditional like ENG broadcast camera.
What does ENG stand for again?
Electronic news gathering.
Exactly.
Come on.
Which it's like just that's what it is. Like this is the camera that news organizations use. You can put it in a studio. You can take it out in the field, and it's, as we'll get into later, it's just basically it's the Swiss Army knife. Everything's built into it. It just kind of works.
Right?
So,
it's really built for high portability.
Yeah.
Plug it in, go. You don't have any extra pieces and parts.
And it's designed primarily for broadcast.
Yes.
Yes, because broadcast was on the move.
Right.
So it's like, oh, we need to go shoot this out there. We need to go to this high school football field.
Yeah, I need to get audio into this and back to the studio and all
Yes,
of that.
right. Back to the truck, back to the studio.
So you wouldn't necessarily find a camera like this on a movie set of a Martin Scorsese film.
No, and we can get into why you wouldn't.
Okay.
But yes, you would not see that. You might see this on like a sitcom that has multiple cameras and they're doing like a live capture.
Okay.
That kind of
Daytime TV,
Talk shows.
Talk shows.
Okay.
Got it.
Over next to you, Lee, is this is a cinema camera, and so it's still a big body, large factor camera, but as we see it right now, it has a bunch of stuff attached to it. If we stripped all that away, the actual if you were to buy this camera, all you really get is this monitor on the back, and then this center part here. Just the camera housing,
the main body.
The main body, right? The lens is extra. This monitor is extra. Even these handles are extra. This thing on the back is all extra. And it's extra because this is a cinema camera. And if you want this to work well in a live environment, you've got to add all these accessories to make it adapt quickly, to get different kinds of shots and move it around. So
To give it functionality that this has built in.
exactly, right.
Okay.
So you may ask, why in the world would I, if I'm going to make this do all the things this does, why would I use that camera? That's a great question. Let's come back to that. This one here in the middle is more of a DSLR kind of camera. So this is a pocket cinema camera. It's the smallest option, obviously, but it has all the same components, right? It's got a lens you attach to it. It's got a lens mount. It's got the camera body. It's got a viewfinder on the back. They all do the same thing. They just do them differently.
So you mentioned DSLR. So some people may not know what that is.
Yeah,
So
it's one of those things that the name still, it's just what we call it, digital single lens reflex. Did I do that right? DSLR.
yeah, that's
Yes.
smart.
But it doesn't really.
It's like Kleenex or Google, like.
Yeah. So what it means is actually before we had digital cameras, right? These the DSLR was made to take photos, and so inside the camera there's a sensor, but when you look through the old school viewfinder like this, there was actually a mirror inside there that would allow your eye to see through the lens, and then when you push the shutter, that mirror would reflex up to reveal the sensor to the lens. Light would come in, take the photo. So when we take a DSLR and we shoot video with it, the mirror stays up the whole time. So it's one of those things that doesn't really apply, but we still call it that.
So for the most part, when you hear DSLR, you're thinking in terms of the actual form factor of the body.
Exactly.
Not necessarily of the way it works, because
Right.
for video, that sensor is going to be open all the time.
Exactly, yeah. It's more about the form factor and the ability they use certain kinds of lenses. They have certain kind of lens mounts.
But they look really good.
They look fantastic. And the reason they look so good is because it's all about sensor size, right? When we talk about, I want it to look cinematic, that can mean a lot of different things, but one of the biggest things it means is that shallow depth of field. So if you look at if you hire a photographer to come take pictures of you and your family, they just look different than your iPhone. Well, they used to. Now the iPhone has portrait mode.
Right.
So portrait mode is trying to copy that kind of aesthetic. And the way you get that because the actual sensor inside this camera, this is what's kind of crazy. This camera is the smallest, has the biggest sensor.
Wow.
The sensor inside the ENG camera is actually one of the smaller sensors in video world. It's a 2/3 inch sensor. And then depending on what kind of cinematic camera you get, it could be a Super 35 sensor. It could be a full frame sensor, which is in a DSLR a lot of times. And it's just a bigger sensor, which allows it to capture more light. It does better in low light sensitivity. And it just, there's advantages to it.
That's what creates that look. When people say,
Yep.
it looks like a movie, it looks like Martin
That's part of
Scorsese
it, yeah.
again, it's because of the sensor.
Exactly, yep. There's some drawbacks with that, like when you use a cinematic camera and you have a larger sensor. If the sensor is larger, then if I put a 50 millimeter lens on this camera and a 50 millimeter lens on this camera, this one has a smaller sensor, so it's actually a tighter shot. So if you're in a big room, a theater, or an arena, and you need to, get a camera shot of someone 100 feet away, then it's just easier to do that with a smaller sensor camera because it's like by nature it's already a tighter shot.
Okay.
Interesting.
So what I'm hearing you say is this one was made for news stations, on the go, live environment, highly, highly flexible. So like in church, that makes a lot of sense. It's got comm built in, tally lights, all of that. It was designed really to cater towards live events. But then documentaries started coming out on iPhones and people went, man, it'd be cool if our live worship experience could look like this.
Right.
But it doesn't have any of that functionality built in. It's getting better. And then this is kind of like a hybrid.
Right.
Because of all the other accessories on
There are things you can add to this camera that give it the functionality of a traditional ENG. You can even get remote control from your control room. You can get different kinds of I/O. You can get comm built in. But it's all stuff you got to add to it. A lot of times it's third-party accessories, but it's all doable.
Yeah.
So none of these are value judgments in terms of which one's good or bad. It's really just for your application, what look are you going for, and which one is best for the kind of sort of visual storytelling you're trying to
exactly.
create.
It's all about the storytelling. If you're in a newsroom, you don't want one of the anchors to be out of focus and the other person to be in focus. You don't want the LED wall behind them to be blurry. You want to be able to see all of it. So you want to go with a camera that gives you that ability. If you're making a movie, or even if you're doing a concert video and you want some of that focus selection where I can choose what's in focus, then you would want to go with more cinematic.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, the real practical scenario is I've had multiple bosses and directors. They're like, man, that shot looks amazing, and it's from this. And then they're like, man, it looks really good, and it's from this. So it's like, it's the eye of the beholder. It's like, okay, what are you really trying to achieve? Because both can give you fantastic shots.
Right.